So my name is Lauren Lobdell. I lead the client services team at Tutor.com. Obviously, 2020 has been a very challenging year for a lot of us out there, not quite knowing what the future will hold. And what we've been hearing from all of our students and the partners that we work with, whether it's public libraries, colleges, universities, our military partners, corporate benefits partners, and many other partners that we work with, is that people are not really sure sort of what the climate looks like out there. And what we wanted to do was be able to offer some sessions that might help you as a student. So this summer, we're running a series of webinars. This session today is part of our Student Success series. We're going to be running these for the next 5 Wednesdays. So if you're interested in signing up for any of the topics, you're very welcome to do so. For these sessions, our wonderful host will be Amy Dietzman, who I'm going to pass control to here, and she's going to go over some strategies and tips for you on time management. Again, I'll be here to moderate throughout the session and answer some questions. So feel free to put your questions in the question box that is on your GoToWebinar control panel. And with that, Amy, take it away.
Awesome, thank you. So to give you a little background on me, I started my career in education as a high school English teacher. After earning my doctorate, my first higher education teaching job was teaching an online student success course. I eventually moved into teaching education psychology courses for Arizona State University, where I still teach today, and then I also work full-time for Tutor.com. My goal today is to tell you a little bit about what I've learned from my own students, but mainly I'm going to tell you what I learned as a student. I got 2 of my degrees online. As a working adult, I had 2 little kids at home, and while I was working on one of my degrees, I changed jobs twice. I get what it means to be busy. I get what it means to be overwhelmed. I know what it feels like to be exhausted while trying to stay motivated and juggle a million things. And I'm here to tell you that I figured out a strategy. And if anyone asks me how I did it, I always tell them time management and discipline. I'm going to share with you my secrets. Well, they really aren't secrets, but they work. So let me start by saying some of these tips are going to come across as rigid. Being a successful student is a sacrifice, but there is a time and place for fun, friends, and family. So stick with me till the end and I'll tell you how. This graphic is a great illustration of the typical college student, pre-pandemic, of course. If anyone here is fortunate enough to be a full-time college student attending school in person with no job, no debt, and no kids, well then you are so lucky, and you are not the majority anymore. If you're a full-time high school or middle school student, you're still going to learn a lot today, especially with the changing look of your school. And some of the tips I give you today will hopefully you can take them with you when you do go to college. This graphic shows what most college students look like these days. And a few interesting statistics from the graphic. 26% of students work full-time, and 36% are working at least part-time. 28% of college students have kids of their own. And among college students today, nearly half, 40%, are age 25 or older, returning to advance their career or retrain for a new opportunity. And this is why time management matters, because we are all busy. So time management equals productivity. The better you manage your time, the more you will get done. It's really that simple. Did you know that there have been studies on people who make their beds first thing in the morning? And those people are more productive throughout their day than people who don't make their beds. And why is that? It's because bed makers start their day completing a task. This leads to the next task and the next, which brings me to another reason why time management matters. Because success leads to more success. Once you've had a productive morning or a productive day, you will be more likely to continue with that success. Think about when you have a successful week where you've managed your time and you've completed all your tasks just as you planned. That success will carry you on to the next week or the next class or even the next semester. But just as success leads to more success, well, falling behind leads to more falling behind. Once you've gotten yourself on a schedule of doing things at the last minute, it's way harder to get caught up and stay caught up. That overwhelmed feeling takes over. So take the tips I share with you today and use them at the very beginning of a course or the beginning of a semester or even just the beginning of a week. Also, procrastination causes stress. This is probably the biggest mistake I see in all the classes I teach. High school, college, grad students, doctoral students, it doesn't matter. It's point blank the worst way to tackle school, and it will cause you the most angst. But there is hope. Creating good time habits is possible. You can set yourself up for success day after day, week after week, class after class, but it takes consistency. You have to do it right over and over again. And being a good manager of time is a lifelong skill. Life is always busy, and you're always going to have to figure out how to get everything done on a schedule. So learn now. This is a list of what I call time suckers. These things, and probably a combination of many, are what eat up your time and cause you to feel like you aren't getting things done. Unclear priorities and goals is something that I'm going to talk about a little more. But if you don't decide what is important to you, how can you organize your time efficiently? If you're disorganized, you're probably spending a lot of time looking for things, trying to remember what you're supposed to be doing, feeling like you're always running late. Another big time pitfall is saying yes too often and overcommitting. This can be eliminated by setting your priorities and saying no to things that distract you from your goals. We are going to talk more about these pitfalls as we go. So how do we avoid them? Well, I'm going to give you 10 tips. I could probably talk about each of these for like an hour. I'm not kidding, but I'm going to jam-pack this session with all my best stuff. So take one tip, take them all, start small and work up, but don't feel like you have to try to literally rearrange your whole life today. No matter where you are in your educational journey, look at these tips from your perspective and think about if it's something you could try. One of the best strategies I ever learned was putting first things first. When I was getting my doctoral degree, I quickly realized that I did my best work in the morning. Before the day got away from me, before everyone in my life started asking me for stuff, before I started running in a million different directions, before I got tired, and most of all, before my brain got distracted. So, believe it or not, for 3.5 years, I got up at 4:30 in the morning to study and write every day. It became my routine. I got to the point where I didn't even need to set an alarm. I just woke up, grabbed a cup of coffee, and went to my computer while my house was still and quiet. And I worked anywhere from 1 to 3 hours straight before anyone in my house woke up. And then I switched gears and went about my day. It took discipline. I went to bed pretty early for those years, but I created a productive space for myself. Think about what you do first every day. Is it the most important thing you do in the day? What about when you first get to work every day? You may not think that you're doing the most important thing first, but you probably are. At least you're giving it your most important time. Maybe getting up at 4:30 doesn't work for you, but I can tell you that you could probably get up an hour earlier, or maybe you could use your morning time a little differently. Our willpower is the highest in the morning. That's why if you really feel something is important, you should do it first. That means like work tasks, school tasks, exercise. But I get it. Some of you are saying, lady, you are crazy. There is no way. I am terrible in the morning. I am not a morning person. And that's okay, because night owls are still successful. This is where your habits and your discipline get to shine. You can still create your space for your schoolwork, but you need to be more disciplined than someone like me who does it first thing in the morning, because other commitments and distractions will creep in and steal your time. So if you say you're going to study between 7 and 9 p.m. every night, you're going to have to stick to it. Just like I told you, success creates more success. If you're a working parent and you're going to school, you have to be disciplined and very scheduled for your whole family. And this means that dinner is at a certain time, kids go to bed at a certain time, you shut everything off and do your schoolwork at a certain time. And if you're a typical high school or college student and you're still young, you still have to get yourself into a routine. You have to know your strengths and know your weaknesses. Consistency is key as you are constantly reinforcing to yourself and all of the people around you that you are committed. Step 2 is to get organized. If you're going to be consistent, you're going to need to keep track of your to-dos. I've put together a few cool organization apps that you can use if you're into that sort of thing. Remember the Milk, Microsoft To Do, and AnyDo will help you organize your tasks for the day. They connect them to your calendar and you can share lists with others. Remember, success creates more success. So when you have a list and you begin to cross things off your list, it's a win and it will motivate you. People who aren't list makers think those who are funny or maybe ridiculous. But when life gets hectic and you have a lot to remember, trust me, you will find lists to be helpful. I live by my calendar and I schedule myself almost every hour of my day. My calendar is on the face of my watch. It's the first thing I see when I look at my phone. And I keep my work and my personal calendars together and I put everything on them that I need time to complete. So if I need to spend 2 hours working on a presentation like this, I block it out on my calendar. If I need to remember to call my dad, I put it on my calendar. I also have a whiteboard in my home office where I list out things in order of importance. And I cannot tell you how often I've put something less important on the back burner and I forgot about it. But my whiteboard saves me every time. I know it sounds like I am rigid, but I know my strengths and I know my weaknesses. And my strength is keeping track of things, but my weakness is keeping it all straight in my head. So when you start a class or a big project is assigned, schedule yourself to get things done. Put assignments on your calendar, make lists of all the smaller tasks that you need to complete leading up to that big assignment. If looking at your calendar doesn't come naturally to you, then try one of the apps I just recommended and set alerts. I'm an organization freak, but the truth is, if you are organized and you keep track of your tasks and your responsibilities, you will become a master time manager. Step 3 is to know your priorities. Remember how I started with time pitfalls and I said, a lot of people don't know their priorities. Well, if you confuse what is a priority with what is just a distraction, then you will waste time all the time. You may have heard of Stephen Covey. He wrote a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and that's where this graphic came from. He says that people who have mastered time management understand where their priorities fall and spend their time in Q2, being effective and efficient. Note that Q2, which is quadrant 2, still leaves time for recreation and creative thinking. It's not all work. Some people spend a lot of time dealing with Q3 tasks and they confuse them with Q1 tasks. They think these tasks are important when they really aren't. That is why Q3 is called the quadrant of deception. Many times the urgency of these tasks is due to others' priorities or needs and not yours. A good way to differentiate a Q3 task from a Q1 task is to ask yourself, is this task related to my goals? Is this going to get me closer to graduation? Is this task going to help me get a better job? Q4 is called the quadrant of waste, and for good reason, because it contains all your time wasters. A lot of people have a tendency to hover around Q3 and 4. After resolving their Q3 tasks, they go into autopilot mode and they spend all their time in Q4. This can be because they have nothing better to do and they're bored, or it can also be because they're procrastinating the things they should be doing. Quadrant 4 creates no value in our lives whatsoever. Note that the word excessive comes before relaxation, TV, gaming, and internet. It has to be excessive to fall here. So a good question to ask yourself is, did that just keep me from doing something that I should be doing? Do I feel fulfilled now that I just spent 4 hours on Snapchat? If your answer is no, you probably need to cut it down. Step 4 is to just start. Research papers and projects are always overwhelming. There's no way to gain momentum though if you don't just start. So tackle small things first. Look at the parts of the assignment that you understand and start there. Most students procrastinate because they have a fear of failure or because they are confused by an assignment. When you're confused, you probably also get frustrated. And then you waste time feeling frustrated. So sometimes if you just start, things will become more clear. Be productive. Well, that seems easy, right? Well, it's not. But one thing I learned from my students over the years is that most say they struggle with productivity because their workspaces are a mess. So they decide to straighten up before they get started studying. And before they know it, 2 hours have gone by, and guess what? No studying. One way to be productive is to set up your space for productivity. Organize your desk area at the end of each study session. That way, when you say you're going to get studying at 7 p.m., you can walk straight into your space and start. Also, one little tip I always do is for work, school, life, because you know I'm a list maker, I make a list at the end of every work day for the things that I want to remember to do the next day. That way I can jump into each day when my willpower is high, remember it is high in the morning, and when my motivation is high in the morning, and I can get going. An example of controlling the time you have is this. I used to take my kids to swim lessons 2 nights a week. And during that time, I would watch them swim, I would scroll through my phone, maybe I'd go shopping at my favorite clothing store that was right down the street. And when I became a student, I planned ahead and I used my time to be productive. I downloaded all the articles I needed to read. I pulled up my textbook chapters that I needed to read. I did all those things in the morning. And then I took my laptop with me to swim practice. There was no internet, but that was no problem because I already had everything downloaded. And I would complete my readings for the week and take notes while watching my kids swim. So I already told you that I wasn't a night person. I knew that about myself. So I didn't try to write or do any heavy brain projects during that time, but I used it because it was time that was literally handed to me. I had to be there, so why not be productive? You can use your time like that too. One of the biggest mistakes I see college students make is taking unnecessary time off from school. So step 6 is to keep momentum. High school students too, I'm talking to you. Sometimes you decide you don't feel like doing your homework for a week, so you just don't, right? The worst thing about doing this is that it upsets your momentum and your routine. If you're feeling burned out, know that you're not alone. All students get burned out. Take a weekend off. Take a day off of work and school and go do something fun. Reward yourself at the end of every semester or every term. But don't shut down unless you absolutely have to for your mental state, because I promise it's that much harder to get back into it again. Step 7 is to avoid procrastination. I've already talked about procrastination quite a bit, and I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to work ahead in your classes. Why? Well, because life happens. When I was in grad school, my husband broke his leg on a Friday. I had a huge paper due that Sunday. Thank goodness I had my paper mostly done because that weekend was chaos. He needed surgery. We were back and forth to the hospital across town. And when I brought him home, I had to wait on him hand and foot. He couldn't even go up the stairs. I would not have been able to write that paper if I had waited until the day it was due. My students always have trouble with this. Every single week, someone loses internet right around midnight when a paper's due. Someone gets sick. Someone has an unexpected emergency. A lot of times it's an excuse, but a lot of times I realize it's probably true because life happens. So think of pulling weeds. If you have 10 weeds to pull, you'll be more likely to go out and pick 10 weeds than if you wait until there's 300 weeds, right? So when I was a student, I had a schedule. I spread my work out so I didn't have to do it all at once. A little bit every day is more manageable than a lot once a week. So do your best to use the same schedule every week, no matter what is due, so you stay in your routine. Some weeks you'll use time to work ahead. Some weeks you'll be a little more under the gun, but be consistent. Do a little bit every day, work ahead, and you will believe you can do it. So 80 to 95% of college students engage in procrastination, and 75% of them actually say, I'm a procrastinator. 50% procrastinate consistently and problematically. And that word's important. It's problematically because procrastinators don't see it as a strength. I liked working ahead and giving myself time to reflect. Have you ever worked on an assignment and then walked away from it and thought, oh man, I should have added this, or I should have written it like this? If you procrastinate, you don't have the luxury of walking away and reflecting on what you just did. Why? Because you have to hurry up and submit it before the time's up. And why procrastinating is bad? Really, this is true. Students who turn in assignments at the last minute tend to get lower grades. There's research on that. And procrastinators are often afraid of failing. Procrastination increases stress, depression, anxiety, and fatigue. And one other thing I want to add is it's guilt. When you think that you're going to work on an assignment on a Wednesday and you start to kind of feel guilty when you don't do it, you put it off till Thursday, and then you feel a little guiltier when you've put it off till Friday. Just get rid of the guilt by doing things when you set out to do them. Step number 8 is to eliminate distractions. Distractions are time eaters. So don't be on everyone else's schedule. If you're responding to texts and emails and you're distracted by what your roommate or spouse is watching on TV, you're on someone else's schedule and not yours. You're also wasting precious time. When it's time for you to work, put your cell phone on silent and put it in another room. Turn off the alerts that you get on your computer, from social media or your email. Don't work in the same room as a TV or your video game console if you can avoid it. Also, there are studies that show you shouldn't try to work or study in your bedroom because your bed becomes a distraction. If you find that your dorm room or your bedroom is a problem for you, find somewhere else. Maybe sitting outside or at a coffee shop is better, or maybe just sitting outside on your front porch is better. Also, if the kitchen is the hub of your house and people are in and out and they're distracting you while you're trying to study, then don't sit there. Step 9 is to set boundaries and expectations with your family and friends. I have a friend who was a grad student, and he said that every time he sat down to do his schoolwork, his wife would start talking to him, turn on the TV, or ask him if he wanted to go to the gym. He had to set boundaries with her and let her know that his study time was sacred, but he also had to be careful not to give up his study time on a whim. Obviously, if she asked him if he wanted to go to the gym and he said, yeah, let's go to the gym, well, then she figured he would say yes whenever she asked. I set boundaries with my kids who knew that when mom was on the computer, it was study time. Me going to school was a sacrifice for our whole family, but it was also me showing my kids that I was committed to something and I was going to complete what I started. I hear so many adult students who feel guilty for going to school. They shouldn't, and you shouldn't. You are setting an example for your kids and you are probably trying to create a better life for them. But one caveat to this is to set a routine so your family knows what to expect. If your study time is all over the place, it's hard for others, especially kids, to understand and adjust. Set your study times and stick to them. If your schedule has to change daily or weekly, maybe your work schedule changes, so your study schedule has to change, post your schedule somewhere so others around you know, and then they can also hold you accountable. And if you need help from a spouse or a friend or your parents while you're trying to work on a big project, ask for it. Don't try to do everything. Ask for babysitting help. Ask your roommate to go grab you a sandwich. Ask your parents to hold you accountable while you're studying for your final exam. And now we're to the best part, and that is finding work, school, life balance. Fun and family time are that much better when you've met your goals for that day or that week. Just because I was crazy with my schedule doesn't mean that I didn't know when to turn it off. See, if I spent 3 hours early on a Saturday morning writing, then I still had the whole day left to go for a hike, take my kids to the park, bake, make dinner for my family, and don't think I didn't take naps. If I got up at 4:30 in the morning and worked really hard and then went for a hike and spent time with my kids, I took a nap. My students often complain that their friends are a bad influence and distract them from doing their schoolwork because they feel pressured to go out on a Friday or Saturday night. and that's often when they're trying to study. I tell them, your friends may be the problem, but also, did you ever consider that you could schedule your week differently so you can go out on Friday night with your friends? Sometimes it's not possible, but if you've procrastinated, you're going to be the one stressing out and telling others that you can't go out when you really want to. No one says your life has to end when you're a student. So manage your time, be disciplined, stick to your schedule, and then reward yourself when you've completed your tasks. So here are the 10 steps I just shared all in one place. And I have my references here, so you know I didn't make all of this up, but most of it is from my personal experience. And lastly, I just want to remind you before we get to questions that we have another webinar coming up next week, and this one is on study skills. It's at the same time as today. And I'll be answering questions like, how do you study for a test? How do you read a really dry textbook? How should you take notes? Join me and I'll tell you. And I'll pass it back to Lauren.
Thank you, Amy. That was really helpful. So I appreciate you doing this session today. It actually really helped me as I think about my own work. So I'm not a student right now, but I have a full-time job and have to balance different things. So I think you can take strategies whether you're in your career or you're a student right now.